So hi everyone, listeners and viewers. It's TNN and with David Hundeyin. If you watched the last podcast we did, we talked extensively about David, and we laid focus on the new Nigeria per se being possible, and we're still on that journey. And I think we've come to a crucial point in time in our history now where the reality is hitting us in the face. I'm not one to look at things and be frivolous with it. I know for a fact that there's something happening often in the mindset of Nigerians now. The irony is that we have the potential to do whatever we want to do, but are we really doing what we need to do? So I welcome David now, and it's not a question and answer kind of situation. It's really just let's have a conversation about the current state of affairs, how you've been, what's going on, what's your take on the current situation in Nigeria, and then from there we can caveat into the topic of the matters arising, which is obviously the protests coming soon. So first things first, how have you been?
Well, it's been worse. So I've been okay since we last spoke.
Mm,
A few things have changed.
yeah.
I moved to the UK permanently
Okay.
for the foreseeable future. Anyway, um, I
Okay.
I work 9 to 5. I took a bit of a hiatus
Right.
from journalism. I'm still involved with West Africa Weekly, but as I think I remember I told you last time we spoke
Yeah.
that I was selling my majority stake in it, which I did.
Okay. Cool.
So technically, I'm still the editor in chief, but I work more in an advisory capacity now. So I no longer. The last time I wrote a story of any description was in December
Right.
2023.
Right.
So I'm still involved in the space in general. I still offer my opinions. I still speak publicly. I still do a few. I wouldn't call them investigations because
Mm,
I don't think they're um, bulky enough to be classed as investigations. But I still have some interventions here and there, which I either publish directly on my social media or I delegate to a member of the team at West Africa Weekly to publish under their own byline. And yeah, that's pretty much what I've been up to for the past 10 months.
how you finding life in the UK?
Sorry?
How you finding life in the UK?
Boring, but a good type of boring.
That's a good type of worry. It's good. It's good to know, man, because 10 months has been a long time.
Yeah.
Going straight into it. To be honest, when we last spoke, you said a lot of positive things about the Nigerian youth. Things that uh, obviously the truth, but in view of projections, you had high hopes for Nigeria, regardless of what the situation was then, considerably worse now. Those hopes are being challenged at this point in time. That's the reason why I wanted us to talk. Remember, last time I said, hey, let's talk about the irony, the Nigerian irony, but we couldn't really do that. So, but now I thought, look, something's going to happen on the 1st of August, something that I don't think we've seen before. To be fair, in this scale, we've seen snippets of it, and I know we touched on NSAS before, and I've listened to you extensively within the last couple of weeks. Podcasts you did with some guy, and then other things you've done. Uh, you are obviously thinking along the lines that something would happen. From your point of view, what do you think will happen in view of change for Nigeria?
So first of all, I want to caution against being triumphalist.
Yep, of course.
First of all, we don't actually know for a fact that anything is going to happen. The indications are that something is going to happen, but as is
Yep,
often the case in Nigeria, you should only believe it when you see it.
fair enough.
Um,
Yeah,
because Nigerians have an incredible capacity to be very peculiar. Let me just put it that way. So it's entirely possible that all of this preparation and all of this noise and all of this planning has been made. And the day will come and you will see 600 people come out. It's entirely possible.
that's true.
Nigeria is Nigeria. So again, believe it when you see it. But assuming something were to happen,
Right.
why I think this would be potentially a more significant popular movement than anything we've seen definitely in our lifetime is that unlike every other movement you can think of, so in my lifetime, I can think of the post June 12, 1993 nationwide uprising, but wasn't really nationwide, but at least maybe in the Southwest. There was a bit of an uprising. I wasn't really old enough to remember it. I was like 3.5 years old then, but I've read quite a bit about it. So there was something that happened then, and people died as well. Then I think the next major one I can think of in my life was the so-called Occupy Nigeria protests, which was in January 2012. And then after that was the
Was the
NSAS.
current president involved, I believe, by Nigeria?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Intimately involved, and they have actually sponsored the whole thing to begin with.
Right.
So then there was that. Then there was the NSAS protest movement. And then there was, I wouldn't call it a protest movement, but the so-called obedient movement in the lead up to the 2023 election and even afterwards, which bears some similarities to the NSAS movement. And why I think this differs from what it's supposed to start on August 1 differs from all of these. Why I think it differs from all of these is that unlike all of these ones, there is no single thread that you can point to that this is the single issue. So in all of those other ones, there was a single issue. Obviously, we know that there was a wider issue, there was a wider groundswell of anger that was coming from somewhere, but there was always a single issue that those things were anchored around.
I mean, like NSAS, there was the police brutality.
Exactly. So
the
police
other
brutality,
fuel subsidy per se.
Exactly.
But now there's a whole list.
Now you can't pin one thing down.
True.
So I think if it were to happen, I really hope it does happen. If it were to happen, I think Nigeria would be at a point in its life, in its lifespan, in its lifetime, where finally we're having some fundamental showdowns about what kind of a country Nigeria should be, what it means to be Nigerian, what we want to be known for. And I think for pretty much all of our post-independence existence, there's never been a time when Nigerians have actually directly controlled their own destiny or have actually dictated what it means to be a Nigerian or what the outcome of any significant decision should be. So whether it was the 1966 coup or counter coup, or the Civil War, or all the coups that came afterward, or the so-called elections that have happened up until the most recent one, I can't point to any point in Nigeria's history where I can say that Nigerians did that. At every point in time, there was some sort of elite consensus that shaped everything. So the coups were military elite consensus decisions. We had nothing to do with. That was the Civil War. The elections were political, military, and economic elite consensus decisions.
Absolutely.
Right. So people might have gone to vote. There might have been the semblance of democratic process, but you and I know that, it's very debatable whether there's ever been any free and fair election. Definitely in our lifetime anyway, in Nigeria. It's very debatable whether that has ever happened.
That's true.
Right, because how to win an election in Nigeria is not by getting most people to vote for you. It's by having structure, and you and I know what that means.
Yeah, of course.
Right? And it's by being able to win post-election, court petitions. That's how to win an election in Nigeria. So I feel like up until now, Nigerians have never really had a stake or felt like they had a stake in Nigeria. And it is movements like this that will create the preconditions for Nigerians to start acting like we actually have a stake in our own country.
Is that the feeling you're getting though?
Yes, because why I think this is happening now is that unlike at any other time in our post-colonial history, now first of all there's a generational shift. So I think we started seeing these first skirmishes actually from like maybe 2020. Right, we started seeing the first skirmishes. Even before NSAS, which I think is a story that has been airbrushed.
Which one's that?
Even as far back as 2019, if you recall,
Yeah.
there was an incident which it was localized in Lagos, which is why I think it has a memory hold now.
Okay.
There was an incident in Lagos where I think there was an attack against Nigerians in South Africa, and there was a reprisal attack against South African
xenophobia kind of thing.
Perceived South African businesses in Lagos.
Yep, you're right.
So I actually drove it as far back as then when we started seeing signs of this break with the norm, because normally that sort of thing would never happen in Nigeria.
Right.
Normally,
that's true.
it would have been the case.
And it shouldn't, because I do believe that Nigerians are not xenophobic, especially to foreigners. I think we're very accommodating of foreigners. We might practice xenophobia within our ethnic groups, but when it comes to foreigners, I think we're quite accommodating.
Right.
Yeah, be that as it may, why I thought it was particularly interesting was that, based on my reading of the situation, I don't think at any time before that it had ever happened that Nigerians would hear that something happened to Nigerians in another country, and that would motivate them to take a reprisal action, because that group consciousness has never been there.
It hasn't.
But all of a sudden, in 2019, even though it was done in a very negative and violent way that didn't benefit anybody, but you could see that there's something here. I'm not quite sure what it is, but there's something happening here. And then going into 2020, the NSAS movement, where it almost seemed as if it's exploded out of nothing. It didn't come out of nothing, but it felt that way, because all of a sudden we started hearing things like it's decentralized, there are no leaders, and it seemed very sort of well thought out, but it was actually organic. I'll admit that it took me by surprise.
I mean, when we were Dave will bear me witness. We were
having a conversation, and the morning it happened. Go on, Solomon.
We were having this podcast called the Nigerian at that point in time. This was from 2019, during COVID era. And then this NSAS started, and we were doing the same like we're doing now then. And to be honest, remember, we were speaking to some people who were actually on ground, Dave. And it was amazing how the young Nigerians came together. Honestly, that took me by surprise. It knocked me off, and I've been like, since then up to now, that has just been the focal point that I have to get involved. We have to get involved. And we haven't relented since then. So I can imagine how you would feel. And obviously, I know you were probably, very, very active in that regard. We'll talk about that at some point. So I can really align it with how you're feeling now. But I just needed to say
I just want to buttress something David said. He said a collective consciousness.
Oh, yeah.
So it looks like, or feels like, Nigeria has hit that bottom. And we can't go further down.
Exactly.
The turnaround is now. Am I right, David? That's what you...
Go on. Which is why I described it as a showdown.
Yeah.
Like, finally, we're at that point where we have a conversation about who we are as a people and what we actually want from life.
Yeah.
Because it feels as if maybe at every other time, there have been sufficient distractions, or things haven't quite been so bad that we couldn't just manage, because that's our superpower as Nigerians. We know how to manage. Now there's no managing anymore. We've hit that bottom where it's either we turn around and fight back or we die. So now, which is why I said I really hope that this thing actually happens, because I feel like just by virtue of sheer weight of numbers, I'm not under any illusion that this single protest period is going to fix all of Nigeria's problems. I don't think that. But I think there are a lot of low-hanging fruits in Nigeria that can be fixed by just a simple expression of dissatisfaction, widespread mass dissatisfaction. I think there are a lot of low-hanging fruits, right? Especially when it comes to basic issues of governance, right? So I'm not even talking about the high-level stuff and foreign policy, basic level governance where, for example, people, which I think is a very reasonable expectation to have, people want to feel like if you are imposing austerity measures on us, then we should also see the evidence of austerity in the government. Not that we are dealing with austerity, and you are buying
And then
new
you're having a good
jets,
time. You're having a ball.
spending 21 billion on the VP's residence. I think that's a very reasonable expectation to have. And by the way, we saw something similar in Kenya.
Yep.
You know,
Exactly.
so yeah.
I mean,
Exactly.
what is? No, go ahead, Dave.
The Kenya factor is another very important. What's the word for it?
What's the
I'll say
pace
point.
setter?
Yeah, it's something that's also made the Nigerian aware, not just the Nigerian, I think the African as a whole, that the power is indeed in the hands of the people. You know, I've had the opportunity recently to be, let's use Edo State as a yardstick, the political what dynamics going on now because they want to elect a new governor. I've been to the should I call it campaign stops in the UK,
Right.
and I've seen, you know, some of the candidates
Right.
express the fear of the
Yep.
people.
Yep.
You know, yeah. So it's becoming apparent.
It's real. It's
you
real.
know, that the people hold the power. You know, and I'm happy to align with the people who hold the power, as I'm one of them.
They're
You
just
know,
the
I might
people.
be of an older generation, but I'm one of them. You know, go on, Solomon.
Well, no, well, back to David now. The fact of the matter is, I'm excited. Honestly, I'm excited because everything you've said, it aligns with what we are thinking and what we've been saying. Myself and Dave, we talk about this almost every day. The excitement is in the fact that you can see this collective consciousness amongst people. You go to Twitter spaces these days, they are beginning to make sense. You have conversations with young Nigerians that are beginning to make sense in view of progress. You have one-to-one sessions with people that are beginning to make sense in the fact that they all have this consciousness about wanting a better country. But guess what? We've been saying this for decades, you know? So if we're at that tipping point now, this is where I would ask you to chip in. If we're at that tipping point now, like I said before, so where do you see, or how do you see this unfolding from your point of view? You don't have to be, objective with it. Just how do you see it unfolding?
So I think in my opinion, the most important positive outcome of this, if it happens, is that for the first time, definitely in my lifetime, for the first time in living memory,
All right.
both all regions of Nigeria and both halves of the country, north and south, which traditionally have functioned as almost two separate civilizations,
That's true.
for the first time will be fully aligned politically, right? Because this is a political issue. Like, these are all political issues. So for the first time, these two parts of the same country, which have always acted as counterbalances to each other for whatever reason, are going to be aligned on some key major issues. And what that does is that it removes that idea, which has been sold very successfully to several generations of Nigerians, that Nigeria is a fundamentally unworkable country, and that for anything to happen, Nigeria has to break up and yada, yada, yada. Yeah. It will remove that idea. And people will realize that even the insertion of that idea into the Nigerian psyche, that idea that Nigeria is an impossible dream and you should give up on it, that in itself is propaganda, is not true. Right? And that it's actually possible for all the groups in Nigeria to work together, because in actual fact, our destinies are inextricably linked. Yeah. Right? So it's not as if like half of Nigeria is in Africa and the other half is in the Caribbean. We're all in one relatively small West African region. We all have a shared destiny, right? Some of the issues that I have been very outspoken about, such as, for example, the need for Africa to converge economically, because basically nobody else is going to trade with African countries except each other. And yet Africa has the world's lowest rate of intra-regional trade, right? 15%, which is, terrible.
Is that a fact?
Simply by doubling or tripling the rate of intra-regional trade in Africa, you are going to double or triple the amount of wealth
Right.
that is circulating on the African continent. These things are not possible if we are creating more boundaries and borders and problems, between each other. So
Yep.
yes, there are serious historical divisions and serious historical issues that need to be addressed and that will be addressed. The idea is not to gloss over them. That doesn't work. But
so are you saying this is more of a unifying thing going on, technically, in the consciousness of Nigerians?
I'm trying to avoid using the term unifying because that sounds like an emotional term. What I'm talking about is not emotional.
Okay, fair enough.
This is math, right?
Yeah.
People will get to understand for the first time that we are all actually suffering from the same problem. There are different manifestations of it, and it comes in different flavors, but we're actually suffering from the same basic problem, right? Which is artificially manufactured poverty.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So be it, whether it's coming from its ultimate source across the Atlantic, or whether it's coming from the local chieftains who are in charge, the same common enemy that we all have.
Right.
But it's been the case for several decades that these, especially the guys on the ground, the local politicians, have been very successful at, that thing you do to a cat where you point a laser at the floor and the cat is just following it.
I have 2 cats, so I know that very well.
Yeah. They've been very successful at doing that. It's keeping Nigerians focused on all manner of, distractions for decades. But for the first time, you have northern Nigeria, the middle belt, southern Nigeria, uniformly unifying around one, even if it's just one key issue. That has never happened before, to the best of my knowledge.
It hasn't.
And in my opinion, what that will do is that it will, apart from the creation of some sense of shared common identity, common destiny, and whatnot, it will also open the opportunity for both halves of the country to finally have some very, long-awaited, long-overdue conversations,
obviously,
about how to move forward.
Yeah.
Right? Because at the end of the day,
but shouldn't that be happening already? Don't you think that should be happening now in the background amongst people who can foresee this thing already? That's very vital what you said there, because
the thing we're looking forward to hasn't actually happened yet.
Yeah, I know, but if it's inevitable, for instance,
we don't know that it's inevitable.
No. Okay.
I think it is. I think even if the first is not fully blown, even if it's 600 people, presumably, I think that the significance of this point in Nigeria can't be understated. I'm going to completely take this in a different direction.
Yeah, fair enough. This conversation.
In 2012, the current president was in a protest, addressing almost exactly the same things that are being articulated as part of the reasons for this protest. How should they react? Are they going to react with violence? Are they going to react with force? Or are they going to react by listening? It's a question I'm throwing to.
Okay, well, aligning that with why a conversation should be had, this is a good one you said there. How are they going to react, right? Okay, so that is the plus, because that's what the government is thinking about. They have to be prepared, right? You have to be. Now, in the collective consciousness of the young generation, us, or anybody that's involved, my thinking is that they should, or rather my thought process is that conversation about alignment going forward and how this is going to work. There's no reason why it cannot be happening. Since we're all kind of getting to be friends now, the North and the South are beginning to talk. The people in the middle are beginning to talk. And to be honest, some personally, especially people from the North, I'm hearing a lot of voices I've never heard before there's this stuff about Zanga, and that hashtag is really doing the works. So if you're already talking about coming to fight for a common goal, which would happen, well, let me say inevitably, why can't we start talking about how we're going to start working together already? It's an open question, though. I hope you see where I'm coming from, David. In as much as it sounds like it's a bit far fetched because we know Nigeria, we know antecedent. That day might come, nobody might show. But if they do you think we've missed a trick by not having a conversation about how we're going to work together going forward already? Basically, we might be ill prepared.
No, I think so there's a Chinese saying that the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. Second best time is today.
There you go.
So I think wherever it meets us, we cross the bridge when we get to it. There's no deadline on these things. Right? So when it happens, because I think something else we also have to be very conscious of is that Nigeria is a very low trust society, both the north and the south. Everybody's very distrustful of everybody. So this thing needs to actually start, and people need to see that there's some sort of critical mass that has been achieved first before they will even trust that, okay, let's now have that conversation. Otherwise, it just looks like they're just another group of hustlers trying to hustle us. And there's plenty of precedent to believe that. So it's best to leave it for now and wait till there's actually something to work with.
I agree. I completely agree. Well, it's just part of the conversation. I agree because of where we are coming from, and what we've seen happen so many instances.
David sounds like a realist, and he sounds like someone who is more practical when things have happened. I'm hoping that this is the turnaround we've been waiting for.
Right.
I'll be quite honest with you guys. I'm much of an older generation. I remember when we were in university, sitting around having a drink or a snack, we would go, "Oh, Babangida, terrible government. We will never do it when we have that opportunity." But unfortunately, my dear friends, my generation, or two generations before mine and mine, are the ones in power.
And they're doing exactly the same thing.
If not worse.
Yeah.
So that narrative has to change. And I believe, like I said from the start of our conversation, the age bracket now that have the wherewithal are the ones from 35 and below. You could add maybe, okay, go up to 40 if we're being generous, But those are the part of the population that are actually the engine of the nation right now. And you cannot have the engine hungry. You cannot have the engine not having the resources or the capacity to achieve the full potential, So
you're hopeful?
Yes, I am extremely hopeful, and I'm looking forward to that change. I'm just grateful it will start in my lifetime because I didn't think it would. So
I agree, David. Is he right? Are you a realist? You like to see things that way?
I mean, I don't see why not, because again, maybe in his time, things had simply not degenerated to the point they have degenerated now. So the fact that he is even talking about going to university and they were having those kind of conversations at university, I cannot relate because I wasn't even able to go to university in Nigeria.
Oh, wow.
Right. So to get a university education of the standard that you got, my parents had to send me to the UK and pay £15,000 a year to do that.
Oh, wow.
So that's the extent to which things have degenerated by the time our generation came along. And then the generation we're talking about is even the generation after mine, statistically speaking. These guys have never experienced anything good about Nigeria. Statistically, most of these guys have never been able to even get a job.
Yeah.
So I think at this point, I mean, maybe this is me being famous last words, but maybe we're starting to see the bottom, and when you hit the bottom, really the only way to go is up.
I personally think there's a change coming because my focus is on the data. And I've always hinted at this in most conversations. I like to look at the data. So I'm in between you guys. Dave is a lot older. Dave is a lot older than me, and obviously I'm a little bit older. So I'm in between. So I saw Nigeria go from grace to grass. So I witnessed it happen. So I'm from that generation who actually saw it. School was brilliant. Secondary school was brilliant. Before I got into university and decided this is not it, and then I decided to leave for good. And I never regretted it one time because I always go back, obviously. And anytime I go back, I'm like, this is exactly why I left in the first place, right? So I literally saw it go from grace to grace right under my eyes growing up. So looking at that data and then coming here and then working with data and looking at things progressively, it excites me when I see people come together for change. That's why I enjoy talking to guys like you and others who are so passionate about wanting Nigeria to change. I need to feel the energy. I want people to feel that energy, and we need to amplify that energy because that is what is solely required for the change that we desire, right? Now, if this thing does happen on Thursday, or rather, if it kicks off on Thursday, right? Well, I don't want us to dwell on this is what will happen. Those conversations are happening left, right, center. The army will do this. We all know what's going to happen with the army, the police, and all this. We all know. Every Nigerian that has been involved in any kind of protest, whatever, knows what the outcome might be, in terms of nonsense from the government, right? But let's focus on the impact that we can have on it. So at least there's still that energy being released. That's what I'm saying. So what impact do you think that your generation or the ones before or after, what kind of impact can we have to push this thing forward if this thing is inevitable?
So I think the major thing that the current generation can do that the ones before them couldn't do is that they have access to infinite information and near infinite instant communication, which gives them the ability to organize in very large groups in a very short space of time outside of the control of the state.
Awesome.
So I think the first time we saw this, we saw a practical demonstration of this was with NSAS, where the whole thing was basically organized in real time in a decentralized manner on Twitter. Nobody could control it. Right. People tried to control it. People tried to declare themselves leaders or whatnot. It didn't work. So, which is why it was able to get as far as it did, and which is why if this one starts off successfully and follows the same template, it will be almost impossible to hobble. So, I think that's the main difference. They will be able to do this and keep on doing it. Right. So
that's key. That's key. And keep on doing it.
Because
you can have
historically,
you can have iterations of it. You can do it once, do it again.
Yeah.
Right. You're right.
Because historically, we don't really have much of a civil disobedience culture in Nigeria.
No, we don't. We're trying to promote that. Yeah, we don't.
Yeah. So, but this, I mean, if it happened in 2020 and it's happening again in 2024, that's a good sign because previously it happened in 93.
And
then the next time was 2012. And then after that, 2020. So there was like huge gaps. But now there's like a 4-year gap.
Which
next time might be next year.
I see where you're going.
And that's a good thing. When governments learn to become terrified of their people, that can only be a good thing. Because and that's what I mean when I say low-hanging fruit. The people in power in Nigeria, these guys are not geniuses, right? They're not
at all.
They're not Charles de Gaulle, right? They're not Napoleon.
No, they're not smart. These are, for lack of a better word, they're not smart.
These are touts from the motor park who fought their way up. That's all they are. That's all there is to know about them. How they maintain their power is very simple. It's violence and money. That's it. Nothing more to it. There's no deep strategy involved. You pay off who you can pay off, and use thuggery to intimidate who you can intimidate, and that's it. So once they learn that the youth cannot, first of all, you don't have nearly enough money to buy off 200 million people. It's not possible. And then those 200 million people learn that they outnumber you, and you can't use thugs to intimidate them. You can't use thuggery to intimidate them.
Yeah.
Once these leaders figure that out, then it's either they have to leave those roles that they are in because they don't really have the facilities to govern democratically,
Yeah.
and effectively, or they have to learn to actually govern, because most people in leadership in Nigeria don't actually govern. They are in leadership the same way. I don't know, the head of your family holds the position of head of family. It's like it's a ceremonial position that comes with privileges, and that's all there is to it, right? So, but when these things start becoming a more regular occurrence, and at all levels, not just the presidency, the governors, and the lawmakers, senators, everybody becomes aware that you have a whole group of angry Africans that are not going to hesitate to come after you if you don't do what they think is in their interest. They will have to sit up. Right now, they don't have to sit up. Right now, there is no disincentive for governing poorly in Nigeria. There's no reason why you should govern well in Nigeria. So when you have governors like Alex Otti in Abia State, who looks like he's made of like 24 karat gold right now. Meanwhile, he's simply doing
what he's supposed to do.
What he's supposed to.
Honestly.
There's absolutely nothing spectacular
nothing
about what he's doing. Honestly. But compared to his contemporaries, he looks like he's Dwight Eisenhower. And the simple reason is because there is no incentive actually for him to do what he's doing.
Yeah. This is the truth.
So Alex Otti would be the Labour
Abia State.
Okay, right. Yeah. The one that has about 24/7 electricity now.
Well, on a level. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, then again, David is just doing what he's supposed to do, well, we have about 10-15 minutes of your time. Time just goes really, really fast when we're talking. I do really enjoy this conversation.
I just want to say something to David. You made a statement that you couldn't fathom or imagine what university was like in my time. So let me just give you an idea. When I got into university, my first allowance was 3 naira a day. We still had the intra-campus buses, and we were able to collect 600 naira bursary every year. So if you're saying to me that the society so eroded to that level where you had to be taken out of the country to garner or get the type of education that we were getting then surely there has to be a change. In my generation, conversations are going on right now. You said something. You said thuggery and money. So we left it, in other words, to the 11th team to control Nigeria. So if there is an 11th team, that means they're still the first team. They're still the second team. And if the first 4 teams come together,
and the ideology,
then we break them.
You're right. This is the intellectual warfare that we're talking about. That's why we can't let go. It's like letting the what's that word? The lunatic run the asylum, and then you have insane people outside watching. It doesn't make sense.
It's not even possible to let go at this point, because the way the world is headed. Yeah. They're going to start packing all of us back to Nigeria at some point in the next 10, 15 years. I believe it's going to happen.
In a positive way, you mean?
No. Like, well, the political situation in the West is changing in a way.
Okay.
At some point, all of us are going to have to pack our bags and go back to where we're coming from. It's going to happen.
So we need to fix it before we get there.
Yeah, we do.
Trying to get to. Okay.
We do.
Okay. Well, but that's why we're having these conversations. Remember, just 2 minutes when we started doing the new Nigerian, right? We were just talking about the idea of having a persona of a Nigerian. What is the persona of a Nigerian per se? Because still along the same line of thinking that we just talked about, right? what's the persona of your ideal Nigerian? And then we talked about that, and then we went into the persona of a Nigerian leader. Do you know we struggled? Remember, Dave, we struggled to find a persona of a Nigerian leader. This was before NSAS. It was NSAS that derailed that series. So we've done a full 360, and now we're coming back to realize now we have personas of Nigerians now, young Nigerians, because they've shown themselves. We have personas of leadership because you have the likes of Peter Obi and maybe Alex Otti popping up and showing up. So we've answered that question. But the overarching question that we haven't still answered now, and which is what we're all here, is okay, what's the way forward? How are we going to cross this barrier? How are we going to break this cycle of, as I say, redundancy when it comes to our intellectual capacity, to get things moving? How are we going to break it? I think that's the conversation. Maybe we can use that to wrap it up. How do we break it in view of what's supposed to happen now?
In my opinion, before David says anything, I think it's in the hands of people like David who have influence, who motivate people, who are able to speak and people listen. I think it's time for people like him to get into the game. If we can't beat them, then we beat them by playing their game, by going in there, putting up people like David.
Are you talking about political game now?
Of course.
Okay, that's interesting.
There's no way David can avoid that. I'm begging your pardon, because you're a voice of influence, So let's do away with the norms, the current types of political parties, etc. Start something new.
At some point, you have to speak your clout. That's the truth. So you're right.
Yeah,
that's up to
my
David
opinion.
now. David?
What do you think, David?
Well, so I've always been very careful not to speak as though I assume that there's a pipeline from journalism or from activism into public service, because I think that's one of the things that causes a lack of trust in Nigeria. People believe that everybody's trying to use what they're doing as a ladder into government or into politics. Right. I've always been very careful about distancing myself from that. It's part of the reason why, even though I have access to some of these political figures, I don't use that access. So Peter Obi, he has my direct number. He calls me from time to time, but I'll never be the one to initiate the call, because I'm not trying to actively and knowingly cultivate a relationship with a politician while I'm a journalist. It creates issues. But having said that, I completely understand what you mean. That there's no way to deny that some of the work that I do, just by virtue of the type of work it is, has some political resonance, and it means that I unavoidably have some kind of a political voice. I completely understand that. And I think I am involved in politics even just by doing what I do, because I don't think politics is restricted to participation in the electoral process. Politics is a lot bigger than that. So I think what I'm doing is already expressly political in some way. It might not necessarily be partisan politics, but it is very political, right? So the themes that I'm very vocal about, themes like Pan-Africanism, the African economic education, the need to invest in transport and trade and educational and health infrastructure. These are political issues, right? So
Nigeria as well, because you're very vocal about Nigeria.
Exactly.
You have the good of Nigeria in your heart. I can vouch for that.
That in and of itself constitutes some form of political engagement. So whether there might be a future in active partisan electoral politics, to be honest, it's impossible to say at this point. It's entirely possible that it could happen. Right. It's also entirely possible that it might not happen. Right. So again, the entire reason that I got into this to begin with was ideological. I never had any end game of trying to lever myself into anything, which people are surprised when they get to meet me in person and they realize that I've always funded my work myself. Because a lot of people genuinely think that there's one money bag, or there's one politician or someone behind me or something. They're always very surprised when they realize that I have a 9-to-5 job
Yeah.
and there are no millions sitting in any account anywhere. You know, what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
You know, so why did you take on all this risk if there's nobody backing you? People are always very surprised when they realize that I'm a bit of a madman. But I think that if you're trying to deal with a situation that is that is crazy, you have to be a little bit crazy yourself.
That's correct.
Right. So that's how I say it. So it might be the case that some people like me might might throw their hat into the electoral ring. But as I've said on a separate platform before, there are cautionary tales that I keep in mind. So people like, for example, Yele Shore,
Yeah.
I have him in mind as a cautionary tale because once upon a time he was basically me. Once upon a time.
Yeah.
Right. So the space I'm occupying now, he was basically occupying that space once upon a time.
Yeah.
And then he went into partisan electoral politics, and I'm not sure it's the same person anymore.
With the right environment, which is something we discussed on as well, Dave, if you remember, the environment is missing. With the right environment, would that be something you would gladly participate in?
With the right environment, I think anybody and everybody should absolutely be involved in electoral politics.
You're already talking like a politician there now.
But that's a very important proviso that you
sometimes,
added with
David,
the right environment.
It is not for you to decide.
Sometimes the people to drag you in.
on you, you know, and you have to take it.
So this sounds very suspiciously like what those Nigerian politicians say when they say I have to consult with my people.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
The future is one of those bridges that you will cross when you get to it. So it's not something it's not something I think about actively. If it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, I'm perfectly fine with it.
Right, you are.
Yeah, I always like to have a conversation with you because I try to take it to the dimension because I know, obviously, I follow you on your platform, so I know the engagement you have on a daily basis. So it won't be fair for me to come and start asking you the same kind of questions, or we're talking about the same thing that you're going to talk about tomorrow and next. So, that's why I try to keep it a little bit just, let's just have a chat. I'm hoping that maybe after this thing kicks off, obviously we've met Dave now, and like I said, we're partners here in the UK as well. And hey, you're in the UK, who knows? We might bump into each other someday or plan it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, if you're up north, sure.
Well, I'm north. I'm not up north. You're looking like Manchester that side?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. We'll work it out. I'm not, but it's always possible. It's UK. It's only last we get into the car. You're 4 hours away.
Yeah, it's a 4-hour train, right?
Yeah. So we can always work something out. And face to face will be good to have this podcast face to face going forward. I would love that, because I think that works. But my point is, after this happens and something is happening, it would be nice for us to get together again and react on what is happening. The reactions from an empathy point of view. Yeah, fingers crossed. Especially from a guidance, because you know what? People need guidance. They might need emotional support. They might need just encouragement. It's not, we should all just be shouting all the time about this wrong thing. Sometimes we have to bring our own, what we have inside, to give to them. And this is what we do constantly. So if you don't mind, that would be great going forward as well. Last one from you, Dave, if you want. So we can let David go. I just got to go to work tomorrow.
Yeah, I just want to know how your second book went. You were talking about writing the second book when you had the podcast.
It's been out for about 7 months.
Yeah, breaking point.
Where do we find it?
It's on Amazon. It's on my pinned tweet. It's on my my bio on Twitter. The link.
So can you give us those links?
No, I have them. I feel really guilty that you're even asking these questions because I do. Like so I'll push everything to you, David. I promise.
In fact, like literally right here.
Yeah.
This is a copy of Breaking Points.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Yeah.
I don't know why the picture is blurred.
It's blurred. I don't know. Yeah. You have a filter.
There we go. Right. Okay.
I'll push that for you. And maybe we can do a review, Dave, on one of your podcasts, Dave.
Absolutely.
Well, that's my fault. Sorry, I was going to ask, but I can always save that for some other time. Don't worry.
It's on Amazon. If you order it today, you say
tomorrow.
Next day delivery with Amazon Prime.
True.
Thank you.
True. Let's do it. Yeah, that will make a promise. If you met before, we will have a chat next. We'll have gone through it. a little
Yeah.
bit, Dave?
I mean,
You know?
spoiler alert, it's 600 pages. It's quite long. So
Uh,
I used
well,
to read books like 1,000
guys, this
pages.
guy reads a lot, man. I can vouch for Dave.
thank you.
Dave is always in books. Any questions for us? If you got any, if not,
I mean,
no.
I guess my closing comments would just be that I
Mm.
really hope this happens because I think just
Yeah.
Nigeria needs it. The Nigerian people really need it.
Yeah.
Like we really, really need it. I need it. We all need it.
We do.
I really hope this happens. And if it does, I mean, so I don't want to sound like I'm Che Guevara. I'm not. But
Right.
if it does, like this will be something that I would consider I would consider violating the terms of my asylum for. Like I would consider returning to Nigeria, even though I'm not allowed to. But I
Yes.
would consider doing that if it
Same
happens
here.
a certain way because of just how important this would be. But
Please.
anyway, fingers crossed. Let's see.
But you see, that's the true word that I'm talking about. That's what I always get from you, that passion for Nigeria. And like I said earlier on, like I said, if the environment is right, I know things will be considered. You know, David, it's always fantastic talking to you. I always feel like, okay, fair enough. Someone is giving us hope again. That's how I feel. But it's a renewed kind of inspiration because that is what comes out when we listen to you.
I thought you were about to say renewed hope.
No, I stay clear of that because someone has stolen that thing and bastardized it. So we try not to
Renewed
align
hope.
with that. No, it's a renewed inspiration, which is even a little bit more better. If you notice, we didn't go into anything to do with politics or this nonsense going on, simply because, this is really about how we feel genuinely about things. And I think there's more value in it. It's always value driven, these conversations, like I've always said. So we'll be looking forward to it. Now that you're in the UK, obviously, we can always work something, and it'd be nice to catch up and have a drink. And who knows after that, But we're always here anytime. We need to have a chat. I'm glad that you're available to come to us for that. Yeah.
Right.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for your time, Dave. I really appreciate.
Same here.
To get some sleep. All right.
Thank you.
Cheers,
Thank
buddy.
you.
Bye.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, he's quite knowledgeable. The kind of names he throws out, the kind of statistics he throws out,
Yeah.
Impressive.
It was great. I totally enjoyed every minute of it because David is a great guy.
He's one for the future, and whether again he likes it or not,
you have to get involved.
Exactly. It's as simple
We'll force him if he doesn't want to. We'll force him.
It's as simple as that,
All right, man. Let me call you.
Great conversation.